Mr. Creep the Crook by Alan Alberg. Read by Olivia MacDonnell. Mr. Creep the Crook was a bad man. Mrs. Creep the Crook was a bad woman. Miss Creep and Master Creep were bad children. And Growler Creep was a bad dog. For some of the time, Mr. Creep and his family lived in a secret den. For the rest of the time, they lived in jail. One day, Mr. Creep was sitting in his little jailhouse. He was drinking a cup of jailhouse tea and eating a piece of jailhouse cake and planning how to get out. Here is Mr. Creep's plan. Mrs. Creep was knitting a jailhouse jumper. When she saw the plan, she said, "That's a nice plan. Can we stop at the wool shop?" "And the sweet shop too," said the children. But Mr. Creep shook his head. "No," he said. "No changes to the plan. It's foolproof." A few weeks later, this happened. As you can see, the plan was foolproof. Well, nearly. The next day, Mr. Creep was sitting on the sand. He was eating a seaside sandwich and drinking a bottle of seaside beer and planning how to get rich quick. Here is Mr. Creep's plan. Who to rob? Mr. Biff. What to take? Gloves. Who to rob? Mr. Cosmo. What to take? Magic hat. Who to rob? Mrs. Wobble. What to take? Food. Mrs. Creep was being buried in the sand by the children. When she saw the plan, she said, "That's a very nice plan, but you forgot the wool shop." Then, a few days later, this happened. The Creeps got biffed by Mr. Biff and had their bottoms burned by Mrs. Plug. Mr. Cosmo the conjurer played a trick on them. Mrs. Wobble the waitress dropped a jelly on them. They got stung by bees, kicked by a horse, and chased by cops. By mistake, they also burgled a burglar, and he robbed them. And besides all that, it snowed. Was that a foolproof plan too, Dad?" the children said. Mr. Creep said, "No." A few hours later, Mr. Creep was sitting in his secret den. He was drinking a glass of secret water and sticking a secret plaster on his nose. Also, he was dreaming of his cosy jailhouse and planning how to get back in. Here is Mr. Creep's plan. "This time it is really a foolproof plan," he said. And it was. Now, as you have seen, Mr. Creep the Crook was a bad man. Mrs. Creep the Crook was a bad woman. Miss Creep and Master Creep were bad children. And Growler Creep was a bad dog. However, most things change as time goes by. So, after a year or two, the Creeps were not quite so bad. And after another year, they were nearly good. And after 6 more months, they were good. At last they were let out of jail. The next day, Mr. Creep was sitting up in bed. He was drinking a cup of homemade coffee and eating a slice of homemade toast and planning his last plan. Being good, final plan. When Mrs. Creep and the children saw the plan, they said, "That's the best plan of all. It's perfect, Dad. It's foolproof." And so it was. Well, nearly. The end.